Okay, this is going to be my initial review. There's going to be spoilers for the DLC, of course. I spent about 40 or so hours in the DLC, and I used some of this post-DLC stuff in the base game, just clearing up Consecrated Snowfield, Millennia, Plaza Deus Ex, what have you, the end game of the base game. And that's what you'll be seeing on screen. I play with a playing perspective and restrictions of power level, which should be familiar with a lot of players who have been playing Souls games for a while, especially in Dark Souls 3. But the restrictions that I use in Dark Souls 3 generally is just for PvE, no Sellsword Twin Blades and no Chaos Bed Vestiges. I have played with both of them in the past. I've gotten my enjoyment with them. It's been great, but I find my runs extremely more interactive and much more fun when I don't use them. And I will still go Dark Build, I will still do Pyro, which can both excel in great lengths with these sorts of builds and setups and things that I've restricted. But those are the only things that I need to restrict in Dark Souls 3 in order to get that sort of very interactive, skillful power level that I'm looking for. And in Elden Ring, it's quite the laundry list, because it includes no summons. I've played the game with Mimic Tier on the first run, with like a Moonveil and all the sorceries that are really good. I did not have the most overpowered into build ever, of course, on that first run. How am I going to? I don't know anything too deep on my first run, or second for that matter. Because on the second run I tried to use non-Mimic Tier summons that weren't Tish, basically. And even though I was messing around with Fanged Imp Ashes and the Great Shield guys, they were still far too strong, because they are summons that can have quite a bit of HP. And because I'm very used to playing with summons that don't have quite a bit of HP in the 2002 and 2004 game, Champions of North and Champions of Return to Arms, these summons that have quite a bit of tankiness, it's way too strong. It's so strong. And, oh man, my third time Elden Lord, I did no summons. And I went in with basically some of the most strong stuff that you could go for on a Dex character. And I realized that that was still too strong, like far stronger than the relative balance that like a Sellsword Twin Blades and Chaos Bed Vestiges would have relative to Dark Souls 3. So the Souls balancing just wasn't there at all in terms of the base game. And I had to experience what was super easy to do on my first run in Dark Souls 3. I had to experience that joy on my fourth run of Elden Ring. Now, did I have good fun with all of them? Yes. But I knew from the get-go that my base fun would be much better if I had things balanced out. And it still took me 4 runs to do so, compared to literally 0 runs. You know, I was able to balance it out on in the middle of my first run in Dark Souls 3 without much issue at all. So, there's of course stuff from one-shot type channels, extreme buff stacking that I've restricted as well, but quite a bit of stuff I've restricted for myself. And I've also restricted no NPC summons, except for one part of the DLC, which is really bad, but that's the perspective that I went through in the DLC. I can give you all the specifics if you want me to in the comments, but generally there's still so much build variety, there's still so much fun in build crafting once you know the certain perspective, and that's where most of my joy came from, which is this being an action RPG. There is the preparation and the execution. There is the build crafting, the knowledge aspect, and then there is the actual skill expression, or the execution. So every sort of RPG is balanced around preparation and execution. Which one do you favor the most? Turn-based RPGs are going to be much more focused on preparation, and action-oriented games are obviously going to be more focused on the execution of your strategies. Now, I love a good balance, but I like when things are swayed either way, as long as things are within my personal tastes, which I won't get too deep into, but they're fairly specific relative to games, but also pretty broad. I understand that's not giving you a lot, but that's not very important. At the end of the day, I really like these styles of RPGs, action games, whether it be turn-based or what have you. I just want them done well. And I think that even though base game Elden Ring has a lot of balancing issues, and has done a lot to sort of try to bring everybody in a weird attempt to have like difficulty modes within a single game, like a single mode, it doesn't do a good enough job telling the player what's this, what's that. You have to leave it to analysis, and of course a lot of people aren't particularly good at game analysis, which is truly unfortunate. The state of a lot of PvE guides in this game, they don't mention restrictions that they're going to use, and if they're doing no restrictions, then most of them are just terrible. I mean, you look at the hallmark of a good PvE guide in Elden Ring on YouTube, and it's Titus Actual, his wife Emberborn, and even their 10-year-old son is starting to make use of all of the unique buff stacking and one-shot strategies, where you can even one-shot the final boss of the DLC in about 2 seconds, a little over 2 seconds. And so, I see a lot of the talk about the discussion about difficulty in the DLC. Like, some people are saying, "Wow, this is too hard," and others are saying, "Nah, bro, you have to use everything at your disposal." And obviously, they're not doing that. Otherwise, every boss would be Soldier of Godric, because that's how Titus Actual treats them. You know, they're all Soldier of Godric, once you actually use the tools at your disposal for real, instead of just bullshitting online. And we get to the point where people are really recommending, whether they know it or not, to turn every boss into Soldier of Godric. Just turn every boss into Soldier of Godric, right? Surely everybody will enjoy the game when it's that. Right? Right? Wrong. Dead fucking wrong. People actually want to interact with a game which series is focused around the execution more than the preparation. And because the balance of this game is so bad in the base game, and that hasn't been fixed in the DLC, oh boy. We have to talk about things as if they were restricted, because even the people who are saying, "Nah bro, I use everything at my disposal," that's fucking bullshit. They're not doing that. They're lying. And they don't know they're lying. But they're lying. And so we look at that, and you look at these unique buff stacking strategies that are so strong that summons become suboptimal, because you're just one-shotting the boss anyway in a quick amount of time, then you have to take a legitimate look about the difficulty of the game with restrictions. And so I think my perspective, given that it has a history to it, considering it's at the level of Dark Souls 3 relative to the enemies, yes, I am more powerful than a Dark Souls 3, but the enemies are also more powerful in Elden Ring. So the relative balance, very similar to Dark Souls 3. Very similar to Dark Souls 3. And once we look at the balance and the difficulty in that perspective, something's off. And so now we get to the question of, would I recommend this game? Would I recommend the DLC is the bigger question. No? And it's not like I didn't have a ton of fun with it, because I did. But no, I wouldn't. And that's not because I hate the game. Oh, you've done too many wrong things. No, it's because the people that are going to have a good deal of fun with it are people that already play and love Elden Ring that are already going to get the DLC anyway. And so my recommendation to them, even if I said, well, if you like Elden Ring, you'll probably like... Okay, those people are already getting the game. The recommendation was pointless. Because they're already getting the game, they're already loving the game. Right? So the nuanced recommendation with all these qualifiers, it's pointless, because they're already enjoying it. Just like I did. But the people who are on the fence, the people who might not be exactly into it, no, don't do it. There are a ton of issues right now, and so wait for the first major patch, and or wait for a sale. And so let's kind of get into these issues. Now, the first one that I alluded to was the boss design, and this is just going to be the main thing for a lot of people. Bosses feel like, most of the time, death right birds who don't have all of the weaknesses and unique strategies to compensate for their immense trickiness in their moveset, in their speed, in their rapid damage. They feel like that consecrated snowfield death right bird that I fought not too long ago in the recording. But without the weakness on their skull, without the massive weakness to strike damage and holy, without being able to skillfully use position-based attacks on the mob's end to your own advantage in dominating the boss rather than just dying less, which seems to be what positional-based attacks are more of in the DLC. It's like, oops, I don't want to be in this position because then the boss will show me something new that I haven't seen in 50 attempts. And I think I'm getting skilled with the boss, but when he pulls a rabbit out of its hat because I stepped in the wrong spot, and I have 0 skill in this move, even though I fought him 50 times, that doesn't feel good. That isn't good, that's not skillful gameplay, that's not rewarding. And sure, that exists within bosses in the end game, it exists within Moog, bad boss patterns that allow this to happen frequently kind of exist throughout the base game, and I'm super disappointed that wasn't like fixed up, because there are some bosses like Melania with her waterfowl dance that are almost guaranteed to show up, and it's just so many cool attacks are not guaranteed to be seen in like a decent length run or attempt. And so the actual getting good aspect just isn't present most of the time. Even if you're playing extremely well, and you basically downloaded the move set for most of the moves, if you get bad RNG, or particularly good RNG, you could smoke a boss with it being unsatisfying in a too easy way, or the boss can whip out something that you haven't seen in 50 attempts and kill you in a way that's extremely unsatisfying on the losing end. And that's just really bad boss design. There's no way around it. That's a horrible experience, because there's no boss refighting somehow, still in the DLC. There's no boss refighting mechanic or anything. And B, the bosses in Elden Ring, especially in the DLC, have so many moves and different combos that they could chain together, and optional add-ons to their combo chains, in which case the exact way that you have to go about memorizing their attacks, you might not even get a chance to do so. Whether the boss just showing you extremely serviceable RNG and you just killing it, being like, oh, that's weird, I didn't feel like I earned that, or bosses just going in and saying, oh, you thought you mastered me? Here's a little extra thing. Here's a little bonus thing that you haven't seen. By the way, try to get good now. And it's like, well, fuck, you know, I've spent the last however many attempts. And the fact that this can happen to anybody removes an element of conversation, meaningful conversation, that people can have with each other, because people's boss experiences can be that much different. And the meaningful way of connecting in this modern age, when we have recordings, when we get into more depth talking about movesets, The meaningful way to connect is totally destroyed by that once you realize it. It gets horrible. The discussions on bosses are not good because people don't realize that you can just get super lucky or super unlucky. And it's just a shame because Miyazaki's part of his whole design, and part of the reason why he was inspired so much by Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, is the way that you bridge some sort of gaps and talk to people about your experiences and have these weird conversations where maybe you saw this, maybe you didn't see this. Well, now we know that we can just look shit up. And so the real discussion that people are going to have is more on the way that the preparation meets the execution. It's more on the way that how their build and their setups uniquely interact with this boss, with this area, what stories you have to tell. And these stories can be told even if the boss moveset AI patterns were toned way down and made much more of a valuable, interactive, and skillful experience. And yet they haven't been. These stories will always exist and Miyazaki will always get his wish, even if the game gets more balanced. And yet it hasn't been. Which is a shame. Now, every single boss, except for a few, as I adjusted my setup, the current equipment loadout that I had, not my build, I didn't respec during a boss. I respect once outside of post-Mesmer. I respect a little bit so that I can use the Death Knight's long half-axe without equipping a talisman. But every single boss, it was within like 5 attempts that I changed my build-up. I changed my setup, and the boss went down. Except for like Bale and Mesmer. But everyone other than that went down pretty smooth. And that's good, but then you get into the nitty-gritty details, and the more that I see, the less I enjoy. The more bugs there are, the less weapons that function correctly or are balanced up to even my super restricted level of gameplay. Like, super underpowered weapons are present in the DLC right now. Light greatsword stance damage and poise values are just so off right now. The damage values and scaling of certain attacks on Rolana's twin blades are really bad. It's like an int weapon and a faith weapon together instead of it just being like a proper int faith weapon. New wet blades haven't been added, so progression for arcane builds are permanently scuffed into coming into their own at the mid-game. Int Faith builds are permanently scuffed, Int Arcane builds are absolutely screwed. Faith Arcane builds, the same sort of deal, where you only have a few things that you can reliably progress and upgrade with, and they just don't have a wet blade, so they're permanently underpowered compared to other builds, despite there being certain gear, albeit limited, certain gear in the game that suits them. So it's a bait and switch on, it's like, oh, this build, yeah, you can make this work. Nope, it's nowhere near the same level. And all of this is to say, all of these weird builds, if somebody went around and tried to do it, expecting that From Software would go ahead and address the balance issues with certain builds, they would get uber screwed. And if they didn't know better, they might just assume that's how they go. That's just how it is in this DLC. The game's just endlessly harder than it needs to be in that aspect. Whereas somebody going around with something as versatile as like a strength build like me, with a little bit of stats and in faith, right? The sheer versatility, allowing for this acknowledgement in boss patterns and using preparation and execution to your advantage. This is just on a different level. It's just completely on a different level of build convenience, build quality. And this lack of balance just totally kills conversation, which is, again, what Miyazaki wants people to have. The conversation, the way to connect with people over the game is botched, because the game balanced, even in the DLC, is botched. They did not fix it. Certain things are really bad as well, weapon-wise, with just central design. Like, there are going to be a lot of weapons that are going to be buffed up. There are going to be a lot of spells that have terrible damage, like certain incantations, like the Divine Bird Feathers are terrible. Rain of Fire is fucking awful. The Ramana, basically everything to deal with Ramana is like really bad. I already talked about Rolana's Twin Blades. A lot of these things are just horrible. And certain things can be patched up. Certain things are just centrally designed in a way that sucks. Which, coming from people who have spent 2 years balancing up stuff from the base game, How do you fuck up again in certain regards? How do you manage that? Because in the perspective of my play, the balanced perspective, okay? Balanced yet still dominating if you have the appropriate skill level. And you understand build crafting, you have knowledge plus skill. On a balanced level relative to Dark Souls 3 good builds. Okay? Through that perspective, you want weapons that can deal good chunking and or good DPS, and you have to have some sort of good stance damage in order to excel. Because once you break stance, being able to take advantage of that stance broken enemy or boss is everything. You get so much damage, so much DPS opportunity through that it is just clear-cut core to the experience. And yet, there are a lot of weapons in the DLC which have DPS moveset and a DPS unique skill. Or we have weapons that are chunking moveset and a chunking skill. So I'll give you some examples. The worst example of this is the Euphoria Twin Blade, because this is situated in the final dungeon as something that's super legendary. It has the Twin Blade of Abundance and Decay model that was cut from the base game. It looks gorgeous. It's absolutely beautiful. I love Twin Blades, as you can tell. I mean, I love Twin Blades. I'm not using them now, but I am playing Final Fantasy IX OST, and the main character from that game basically uses Twin Blades. I've loved Twin Blades ever since I could consciously do things, basically. And so I really enjoyed them in this game, particularly because you can put a stance damage Ash of War on them, and then you have DPS and stance damage. Boom! A complete package with good balance that can dominate, but only if you're skillful at the game. Fantastic. Of course, Power Stance Twin Blades with Bleed kind of goes against this, so I have those restricted. But just two-handing a Twin Blade, or one-handing it with something else, like a spellcasting focus or what have you, that's really cool. That's really fantastic. I love that. Now here's the thing. The Euphoria Twin Blade, I would rather just use the regular Twin Blade. And the regular Twin Blade is outclassed by the Twinned Knight Swords. And the Twin Knight Swords is going to be outclassed by any build-specific Twin Blade, that being Godskin Peeler, or the Gargoyle's Twin Blade, or the, the new one, the Black Steel Twin Blade, that can be infused, that has some holy damage on it. That one's fantastic. But this super legendary presentation weapon is fucking just absolutely worse than the other ones, because they just don't have the same versatility. They don't shine on the same level. It's frankly underpowered to a joke. And on the other aspect, when we look at pure chunking, pure stance damage, look at Devonia's Hammer. Why is there a slow, heavy-hitting moveset paired with a slow, heavy-hitting Ash of War? Why? Why? What's going on? I can just use Great Stars and pair that with a DPS Ash of War, and then I'm chilling. And guess what? I got Bleeding Lifesteal on that. And sure, it's not a Colossal, but I can use the Great Club over Devonia's Hammer, and I can fucking buff that. So I don't understand. How are they failing to design balanced, effective gear, even pared down through 3 levels of restrictions? How are you failing to design that? I don't understand. I don't understand how you fucked that up that bad. How? 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 Now, I have more on the list. It's just really weird stuff here. Let's see. I have a list of stuff. The Dancing Blades of Radahn, the Falx, are both the same sort of deal as the Euphoria. Just DPS plus DPS. Wow. How wonderful. They're just jank. The Bonnie Butchering Knife is just god-awful in general. What's it? What else? The Tooth Whip as well. Just DPS with a fast weapon. Like, okay. The Death Knight Twin Axes are fucking terrible because the Twin Axe moveset, or the Power Sense Axes moveset is just fucking awful as it is. The fact that we don't have the Winged Knight Twin Axe moveset on some of these is fucking ridiculous. And when I talked again about presentation, how the Euphoria was presented as this legendary thing that you had to go over this grand journey in the final dungeon to find, and it was so secret, and it was, whoa, it had the shining golden glow to the item, and it gave the loud ding sound effect, and whoa, it showed up all golden. Euphoria, it's a twin blade that has, and then it fucking sucks, right? The presentation of loot in this game, in this DLC, is terrible. A lot of the times, you will go check out loot, you think it's good, you think it's really nice, it's like, oh, here's a Glowvort that you won't use. A legendary item, great Glowvort. You're not gonna use it. It's fucking horrible. Oh, here's this tiny little wisp soul out in the overworld on 2 occasions. What is it? You think it might be good? No, it's some smithing stone 6 or what have you. A lot of the loot in the overworld is a lot of the loot in general. It's like, why is it always done? You know? Why is it that there's this incessance for a game, a DLC balanced around the endgame or even post-game, to give you loot that's like Smithing Stone 6, Somber 3. And it's not just loot that tries to tell you the way. Like when you're looking for the Euphoria, you see loot on certain ledges, and you're guided down. By the way, that's nonsense, because Miyazaki, in his interview for Dark Souls 3, said that, oh, we use fire to subconsciously guide players the way. Then use fire, don't use trash loot to subconsciously show us certain ways. Like, holy shit, why? Why? Why are some of this loot along the way just horrible? Like a pickled liver or something like that. That's awful. Why would that be the case? Not to mention, you look at the tiny wisps out in some. There are 2 examples, 2 prominent examples of tiny wisps of loot, which you pick up on the overworld, that you think might be, oh, this is just a terrible item. This is an awful item. No, it's actually incredible. So we're just taking you for a fucking run here. So if people got the idea that there's so much trash loot in the DLC, because there is, and then stopped picking up random things, because most of it was garbage, they might not run into some of the best items in the game. Like, the Great Katana is just on a random piece of basic looking loot in the middle of a lake with the Ghost Flame Dragon. The Backhand Blade is just kind of chilling as a tiny wisp little item next to this area with a Curse Blade. I was like, what is going on? Why are these things presented in such an awful way? That's terrible. To contrast this, let's talk about some of the good weapons, okay? What I'm using right now is easily my favorite weapon addition in the DLC. By far, the Fire Knight's Greatsword. This thing is fucking amazing. It is basically the Hollow Slayer Greatsword, but for Colossal Swords. And that is fantastic. Putting the God Slayer Greatsword R1s with these Vihander R2s, giving it a little bit of face scaling, a little bit of fire damage, and making it infusible and buffable on top of that. Whoa, From Software, whoa. Amazing, amazing, more of that. And they gave us more of that because the Fire Knight Short Sword also is very similar. The Black Steel Twin Blade is very similar. The Black Steel Great Hammer is also similar. Look at the damage, man. Look at the damage. Look at that. It's a thing of beauty. The fact that I have to go in and risk my ass and time things specific ways to get this sort of dominance, that's all that I ask for. That's all that I ask for. A good combination of preparation and execution. That's all that I ask for. And the DLC did manage to provide a number of weapons that I will enjoy. And I'm going to list them right now. Of course, Fire Knight Greatsword, my number 1. Backhand Blade, number 2. Great Katana, number 3. Sword Lance, number 4. Death Knight's Long Half Axe, number 5. Continuing on to what some of these I assume are going to be extremely beloved by me and the community. Spear of the Impaler, the Black Steel Twin Blade, Freya's Greatsword, the Shadow Sunflower Blossom, the Horned Warrior Greatsword, Sword of Night, Script Smith, well, no, it's called the Smith Script Great Hammer, the Dragon Hunter's Great Katana, the Black Steel Great Hammer, the Blood Fiend's Arm, now that it's been nerfed, the Milady, once it gets fixed up with poise damage, Dryleaf Arts and Dane's Footwork, Ancient Meteoric or Greatsword, the Anvil Hammer, Obsidian Lamina, Bone Bow, Raboth's Cannon, and the Claws of Night. These things, I think, are going to be really cool right now. Other things might be buffed up to reach that point, but they just aren't at that level now, which is extremely disappointing. Certain things in PvP might be a little bit different, and other things might shine in PvP, but PvP right now is a super mess. So, if something shines in PvP that I didn't mention, cool, it can be a nugget of gold in a pile of dog shit. Sure. Whatever. But yeah, PvP is an absolute nightmare right now. A lot of overpowered and overtuned things are just running around, being spammed with 0 skill. So, very wonderful. How strange. How lovely. There are some interesting spells, but then a lot of them, like I mentioned previously, like Rain of Fire and other things, are just totally broken and horrible. So, certain good ones I'm going to mention are Blades of Stone, Gravitational Missile, and Impenetrable Thorns are too good, but even if they're toned down, they'd still be very solid. Heal from Afar, Knight's Lightning Spear, Bell's Tyranny, Mesmer's Orb, Fire Serpent, Giant Golden Arc, Pest Thread, Spears, Wrath from Afar, Multi-Layered Rings of Light, and Crucible Thorns. All of these are totally solid. There are some things that I haven't tested, like Cherishing Fingers, Fleeting Microcosm, some of these spells, but a lot of people seem to be not really liking them that much, seem to be seeing that they're quite underwhelming. Furious Blade of Ansbach is super underwhelming in that it's bugged. It doesn't provide any Blood Flame bonus. That being basically the last incantation that you might get in the entire playthrough, and it being like bugged and underwhelming damage-wise, is a serious issue, especially considering how cool it is, how important it should be, how effective it's presented to be, the fact that you can charge it. All of these things should result in a very strong incantation, yet balanced. And it's not. So, the unfortunate thing is that there are a lot of very basic projectiles again, and really no additional support spells. Like, there are no additional, like, weird little low-cost buffs that you can splash onto a bunch of different builds, like in the base game, with Bestial Vitality, Flame Grant Me Strength, certain things like that. Golden Vow, of course. The DLC is utterly devoid of stuff like that, which is a goddamn tragedy in terms of spells. I want there to be these subtle until you get the proper execution type of support spells, or maybe even control spells, like collapsing stars, like stuff like that would be absolutely wonderful. Of course, you know, gravitational missile does that, which is excellent. Probably my favorite spell from the DLC so far. It's lovely. Blaze of Stone is pretty cool too, because of the stance damage buildup. But other than that, the DLC spells are a little lacking. However, what's not lacking are the Talismans. So weird! The Talismans are incredible! Especially what I have equipped now and have been using and will use all the way through this Erdtree progression. The Blessed Blue Dew Talisman. That is a game changer and provides much better mana regen than even the simple infused gear from Dark Souls 3. And this allows for the most satisfying progression through the levels that you could ever do. Not only that, but 15 Faith also gets you Lord's Hail, in addition to like Flame Grant Me Strength and Bestial Vitality and whatnot. So you can have yourself a super reliable build if you know how to invest little bits of points and you know which things to get in terms of spells and talismans and whatnot. You can create yourself an absolute powerhouse of a character progressing through the levels, and I love that. I also love, and I'm going to go on a big list here because the talismans are just that good in the DLC. The Two-Handed Talisman, the Shattered Stone Talisman, the Two-Headed Turtle Talisman, Crimson Sea Talisman +1, the Crusade Insignia, the Aged One's Exaltation, the Arrow Soaring Sting, the Fine Crucible Feather, Smithing Talisman, Retaliatory Cross Street Talisman, and the Lacerating Cross Street Talisman, St. Trina's Smile, Talisman of the Dread, Blade of Mercy, Rolana's Cameo, and the Outer God Heirloom. That's a shit ton! That's so many! That's more positive talismans than I listed off, like, positive spells. It's ridiculous! And it's so satisfying. Oh my god. All these talismans are incredible! And so many of them aren't just, oh, well, the base, you you don't get like an Erdtree Favors +3 or whatever. But you do get, and here's gonna segue into another pro, armor. I'm wearing right now, and this has an unfortunate point to it, but this helmet, the Fire Knight's helm, is basically a helmet of favor. It does a lesser extent boost of that Erdtree Favor Talisman boost. That's amazing. Not to mention there's the Divine Bird, what is it? Talons, yeah. And those boost kicking and stomping skills that can be stacked with Shattered Stone Talisman for a very unique setup with something like Poison Flower Blooms twice. I'll get to the Ashes of War soon enough. There's other helmets like the Fire Serpent Helm or other things. The Rakshasa's armor is really good. The Death Knight's armor is great for stacking with the Death Knight Long Half-Axe. There's Gaius' armor, which is super big and chunky to add on. There's the Great Pot, which can help out quite a bit in a variety of situations and can be used for really good function in terms of just utilizing a lot of the stray cookbooks, which honestly aren't very much of cookbooks at all. They are recipe pages, and if they were sort of put in the game as recipe pages instead of cookbooks, like torn recipe pages, I think people would like that better. If they were pages of a variety of cookbooks that could be put together into consolidated inventory space, that would be cool. Maybe if Moore's quest line involved actually doing that and making cookbooks and then showing him, maybe that would be a really cool way of getting some sort of reward for him or fulfilling a quest for him. That would be super cool, but we don't get that. A lot of the cookbooks are very disappointing. And the fact that they're so spread out and advertised basically as cookbooks, like shown and presented as cookbooks, no, that's goofy. That's nonsense. But yeah, the armor generally is super cool in the DLC. That's fantastic. I love it. You get like the cut content samurai armor too, which is fantastic. Ashes of War, another positive. There aren't too many of them, but the ones that we do get generally are very nice. Like I mentioned before, Poison Flower Blooms Twice is quite spicy. Really quite spicy. Let's see. Which other ones? Savage Lion's Claw is fantastic. Divine Beast Frost Stomp is super cool. I love that a lot. Let's see. I gotta check my notes here. There's definitely more that I'm that I'm not talking about. But yeah, the Ashes of War are pretty cool. I haven't written them down. Blind Spot and Swift Slash are really annoying and unbalanced in PvP, even with the nerf on Swift Slash, but they're great in PvE, and I really like those. Let's see. I gotta look this up. Give you the right details on this. Pardon my lack of prep on that regard. I have more to talk about in other things. Spinning Gravity Thrust is pretty cool, as well as the aspect of the Crucible Wings. A Palm Blast is very nice as well, despite it being unlimited gear. Overhead Stance and Wing Stance are both really solid. Flame Skewer and Flame Spear. I love it. I can't believe I didn't mention Flame Skewer even though I'm using it right now. Carrion Sovereignty is nice, although it's really rare that you'll be able to do it. Ghost Flame Call shouldn't exist. It's way too strong. They basically said, "Oh, what's one of the most powerful things ever? Let's just allow you to put it on like whatever you want." Basically, it's like, how about no? The Death Poker is already obscenely good. Like, it's already tied best in strat in the game, along with certain sorceries that you can cast and the Wing of Astel, just spamming that as you war. It's so good. It's way too good. And then, yeah, there's not that many of them. Other than that, certain ones are still kind of strange. Like, I haven't messed around too much with Dry Leaf Whirlwind, nor Scattershot Throw or Piercing Throw. Wall of Sparks and Rolling Sparks, I'm glad Rolling Sparks have been nerfed. Raging Beast is a little weird, but it's pretty stylish, I suppose, as well as Savage Claws. But again, it's Savage Claws, it's like, you're gonna put a DPS Ash of War on a DPS weapon? I don't think so. That's not very good. And yeah, I just wish there were a little bit more, is all I would say. But the ratio of good ones to really strange ones is really solid on the Ashes of War. Relative to the other things, it's just really solid. It's not as solid as the armor or especially the talismans, but still really nice, generally. What's super strange to me are some of the bosses. The game has trying to tell you to just learn the bosses. Learn the bosses. Learn the bosses. Not give you a generalized skill set via the progression of the levels, via going through the base game. No. You have to learn this specific boss, and when you get to a new boss, you have to learn the specific boss all over again. And it's like, progression-wise, this doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to be going, okay, well, I'm at square one, even though I learned all of these strategies and muscle memory with roll timings and, like, reflexes. No. The enemies and bosses are, like, certain bosses are going to have disgusting delayed attacks, just like the base game, which is just unimmersive, because most of the time, they're so delayed that you can spam roll and roll through them anyway, at which point, what's the point? What skill are you getting from that? What are people learning from that? It's just unimmersive. So less absurd delayed attacks in the future, please, From Software. It just doesn't make sense from any perspective. It's not making you more skillful, because certain delayed timings are different. You just memorizing that boss and that attack, and it's just not immersive in the slightest. And the other thing is that a lot of enemies and bosses are having more and more absurdly long attack chains that you can't really like interrupt, and that you can't strafe as much to get good punishes if you know the specific way to strafe. You have to dodge specific ways, and then maybe run this way or jump that way, and then you can punish. And it leads to a lot of people that I've seen online saying, when is it my turn? When is it my turn to play? And in the past, you would forge your turn. You would make your turn by understanding which ways to strafe, how could you jump this attack to get an attack in the middle of it, this sort of thing. Could you have enough poise on the preparatory side of things where you could tank certain parts of it and get yourself at the end of it, or at the end of the long chain, a solid heavy attack, or a really big charged Ash of War, or charged spell, this sort of deal. And yet, it's just not the case with a lot of bosses in the DLC, which is really unfortunate, because it's just cutting an aspect of preparation and execution out of the game. It's just removing certain aspects of skill from certain bosses, which is really unfortunate. I will talk about a lot of my boss rankings. There are some bosses that I really enjoy that do have long-winded combos, because the punish window is great, and they give certain attacks that are just one-ofs that you can punish right after, like Mesmer. Certain enemies you can learn to punish in a way that are, or certain bosses you can learn to punish in a way that are really, really easy to just automatically dodge future attacks. Like Radahn, you can jump up and do a jumping heavy, and your hitbox is so low that a lot of her follow-up just goes over your head. And then you can roll out of her next move, and then run back, wait for the combo to be over, and then execute your next strategy. And that's just really satisfying. I love Renala fight, I love the Mesmer fight. I actually really like the Commander Gaius fight, aside from the obvious jank of having certain delays, and then also certain animation reads, which I'll get to in a moment, and of course that horrible, fat, lingering hitbox of the charge. That's all terrible, but his actual moveset, other than that, is fantastic. And I went against him with a colossal sword, even though he's resistant to slash, and I had a fantastic time actually learning his moveset other than all the bullshit. And that's such a shame, because we're so close to greatness on so many of these bosses. We're so close. And yet we still want to have this, like, oh yeah, you must master our bosses. Fuck what came before, you have to master this boss now. And make your bosses perfect, then, motherfuckers. Make your bosses fucking ideal to want to learn and master if you're going to make us scrap any sort of semblance, aside from basic movement, stamina management, all that. If you're going to make us try to forget stuff generally that we've prepared, general strats that we know, and to understand and specifically memorize, not utilize good reaction time, but specifically memorize the bosses, then make them perfect. Rolana's got certain bad hitboxes. Mesmer's got shit that I want to talk about too. And they're very nice, but it's still super strange. It should be fixed up a little bit. Mesmer's knockdown sweep, he always follows up with a stab that goes over your head, because the sweep always knocks you on the ground if you get hit by it. And considering he always follows up with that and has no alternative, it's completely unimmersive. He should, if he hits you with the sweep, he should jump up into the air and do that simple spear toss downwards. Because if you roll that move or strafe that move correctly, that's a really easy punish, even with a charged heavy attack with a colossal. That's a great punish window. And that should be the case more often. Because right now, we would take something that would go from super skillful and rewarding, and we've made it something really unimmersive and basically like, oh, you dodged this one, what about this? It's like, okay, great. Totally unimmersive, totally goofy. His grab hitbox obviously should be adjusted from software. Gotta be better on grabs. Phase 1 grab does so much damage, and Phase 2 grab literally does this like the same damage. I don't understand why. He also doesn't have a snake bite grab, which is weird. I understand the current state of From Software grabs. A snake bite grab would probably be horrifying, but they've adjusted the golden hippopotamus grab, and the Mesmer snake grab would be around the same size if it did exist. So I don't understand. Why isn't there like some sort of a snake grab in Phase 2? And maybe this snake grab could have the Phase 1 damage to show that, oh, he's getting stronger in Phase 2 relative to Phase 1. Of course, that grab would have to be properly made as well. So yeah, general positives as well. I don't think this needs to be said. I think most people are going to totally agree, but I'm going to mention it anyway. The game is gorgeous visually. It has fantastic music. The exploration is actually really cool, and I like it. The problem, of course, that I mentioned before is the loot within it is generally very bad, super garbage, generally. The vast majority of the time, it's horrible. And there's a supreme lack of points of interest in Charo's Hidden Grave and the Cerulean Coast. What's going on? Why is it so empty? Of course, everybody's been saying that, but like, why? Why? You look at the points of interest that literally pop up on the map, location to location. And there's such a difference from even the base game to the DLC. And not only that, but certain areas of the DLC relative to Charo's Hidden Grave and the Cerulean Coast. It's night and day, and then night and day again. And it's just so much wasted potential. Which is really unfortunate, because I don't mind an empty open world RPG. I don't. I love Shadow of the Colossus. That's fantastic. Elden Ring and Souls games are partially inspired by Shadow of the Colossus. However, that game was start to finish relatively empty in the game. Going from a pretty full and lively open world in the base game into this DLC, the contrast, and then from the good areas of the DLC to the relatively empty areas of the DLC, it's just a bit disappointing. Especially when certain areas, like the dragon, towards the giant dragon communion area, are so cool. And seeing like the little ruined tower in that environment where you get Egon's Cookbook 1, that's so cool. I just wish there were more interesting areas like that. Oh, it would have been so good. Of course, even more interesting than that, hopefully, with an area good enough to be marked on the map, like certain villages or ruins or what have you. That would be fantastic. Going back to bosses, there are quite a bit that are repeats, which are really unfortunate. There's another Deathrite bird. The Ghost Flame Dragons are just worse versions of said Deathrite birds. And there are like 4 of those. The drakes, like the Jagged Peak Drake and then the Ancient Dragon Senesax, is fucking ridiculous. There's a certain boss that really punishes you for thinking intuitively, and that's Putrescent Knight. I rank him really low, even though, like, technically, if you look in terms in-game, he's pretty fair. I look at him pretty lowly, because a lot of the time his neutral stance, when he ends a combo and there's a punish window, doesn't look like it at all. Because he holds his great axe, his cleaver, right above his head forward in a motion that looks like he can just fucking get you at any time. And so if most of his combos look like that, at the end of it, I'm not going to take the punish window. Anybody trying to play relatively smart in terms of trying to be immersive. Look at that death law. Anybody trying to be like immersive and just going off of reactions or prediction in terms of that boss fight is just going to wait an arbitrary amount of time. Also, the way that they do the putrescent fire or whatever it's called, the dregs, or I forget exactly what it's called, his frost fire thing. It doesn't gradually go towards you. It just appears in 3 sections. It just appears in front of you. One part appears, then the next part appears a little bit faster, and then the next part. And sure, it's easier to jump up, but again, if you were thinking rather immersively, like, I don't know why you wouldn't, you're probably going to get hit by it. And even somebody who I saw was trying to do a level 1 no-hit run, and who actually really enjoyed that boss fight, said that attack, yeah, that's an unfair way to go about making that attack. Absolutely ridiculous. So even though it was an easy attack, and I jumped over it pretty much every time, even though it was a relatively fair boss on the base mechanics on how to adapt to it, the presentation of it in an immersive style matched with the actual mechanics. It's just a bad match. And so I just don't rank it very high. Senesax is absolute garbage. I want to talk more about that fight. Holy shit. What a shit show. It's basically a gimmick fight that's really good to do with some sort of projectile, whether that be a bow, whether that be like the repeating crossbow or the spread crossbow that you get in the DLC, whether that's something like the great bow, like Egon's great bow. I'll do that next time if I run a strength build again. I'll take that route of actually killing Bale first and then fighting Senesax. That sort of thing. I used Lion Greatbow with Rain of Arrows for Senesax, and I actually pretty enjoyed that fight because it's not that often that you get the chance to use that, but it's a gimmick fight masquerading as a legitimate fight. And if you don't know the gimmick, then it's going to be incredibly frustrating. And generally, because it's not presented well, I'm gonna rank it dog shit. It is what it is. Meteor Mother of Fingers right now has quite a bit of jank. Her, like, finger crawl charge on her side is almost unavoidable, even for all of the people trying to do the level 1 speedrun who use literal mods to help them learn to fight more consistently. They still have struggles with that. The laser attack, you have to be at a certain distance away to avoid it via running, or you have to use a special Ash of War, so again, super gimmicky. Again, like a lot of these bosses, they feel like gimmicks, as in, they feel like Deathrite Birds without the Deathrite Bird weakness, which is really, really weird. And then again, going into it, it's like, what do you think would be good? Like, what's the history? Okay, well, a lot of the finger creepers are really weak to fire. But Meteor's in a big pool of water, so she's automatically going to be relatively resistant to fire. It's like, well, shit. Well, what do I do? The presentation is weird. The preparation seems to be cut away. And then the execution, yeah, oh, nope, you gotta learn it all from scratch. All of the execution strats that you've learned previously, not for this boss. You gotta learn it from scratch. There are still some camera issues, like with Bale and the Divine Beast Dancing Lion. There are some definite camera issues. The dragging that the Divine Beast Dancing Lion can do, where it drags you this way and that way, is especially terrible during the lightning phase. It's just really unfortunate. But overall, I mean, I had a decent amount of fun with Divine Beast Dancing Lion. It's just really the camera issues are horrible. The hitbox on the grab comes out a little bit earlier too than it should, as did Golden Hippopotamus pre-patch. But yeah, oh well. Some of the tiny bosses, like, not tiny bosses, but like, you know, not remembrance bosses, like Mariga, Curseblade, Labyrinth, Lamenter, and Demihuman Ons. They're whatever, they're fine. They're not interesting, but they're pretty easy to take out, and I had an okay time dominating them. Again, the Death Right Bird was okay. It's just I'd rather it be something new and interesting. The Great Red Bears were okay. They were better than previous bears. They weren't exact repeats, but again, not totally original. The Golden Hippopotamus was alright. Again, the camera, especially when you get locked up in the corner, if it's by accident, is horrible. Thankfully, the hitbox has been touched up, but still, the camera, it's just, I don't know why From Software is so afraid of panning that damn camera out. I just want to see what's going on, dude. The Black Steel Knights were cool, as were the Death Knights. The Death Knights were especially interesting compared to the Black Steel Knights. Unfortunately, it's going back to spell-wise, we don't get Devonia's hooves. We also don't get the Black Steel Knight, the Crucible aspects of the Crucible tongue. Like the frog tongue. We just don't have access to that. Why? Why? Why don't we have access to those? That would be so amazing. Crucible tongue would be so goofy and so wonderful, and we don't have access to it. Ramana I thought was actually really cool. Her phase change comes out a little too fast, which is unfortunate. But it's really low damage. However, if you're doing a low level run, then that is an absolute issue. And even though it's low damage, again, the prospect of getting a hitless, consistent run should be an achievement worth striving for. And at the moment, it's just unnecessarily fast on that phase transition. Midras are really cool. Even with the low stats, even with like all of Midra's attacks being delayed, that's something that you can very easily learn and understand. It's like, okay, well, all of this character's attacks are delayed. Cool. Okay, cool. Great. Just, I really don't have any complaints, but I just didn't have as much fun as well as generally like the Spectacle of Baal or learning the actually balanced parts of like Commander Gaius. You're never gonna understand this. I'll try to make my case, but my favorite boss in the DLC is the Scadussy avatar. Weird fucking choice. Scadussy avatar is something that's actually relatively easy, and I beat him on my first try when I was terrible at it. So why do I praise it so much? Well, looking at other people fight it, looking at other people struggle or not struggle or what have you, the boss is really, really well presented. It has a fantastic arena that you can 2-it that it's going to be weak to fire. Fantastic, okay. The preparation aspect is there. The moveset is very smooth, very telegraphed. You can utilize a lot of your past skills to beat and dominate this boss, which is just good design. The progression is there in that regard. The rewards are good, as in like Shadow Sunflower Blossom is a really cool weapon. I wish it was a little bit better. That, you know, sometimes you're going to want to use just the Great Club. Sometimes you're going to want to use Shadow Sunflower Blossom for that sort of strat. But still really cool. And then everything about it, in terms of actually going about punishing it, is so smooth. The camera isn't too bad. The attacks that it has make punishing the head really easily done and incentivized. Also, being able to do a sort of Death Right Bird positional AI influence, where you're positioning yourself in such a way that the Scadussy avatar leaves itself up for a punish after a bunch of head-type attacks, are super smooth. Its ground pound, followed by the AoE, is incredible. All of its AoEs are well placed, where, okay, it does its ground pound, and then the AoE is sort of focused on the center of its body, but its head, aka its weak spot, is just to your right, on the side of the AoE. So you can just run to the side of the AoE, run up while you're at him, going at an angle, and then attack the head and punish him. And these sorts of punish windows are amazing. Now, the explosion in Phase 3 is actually pretty solid to run away from. Then you have to dodge the projectiles only. I really wish that the radius of the explosion AoE was more defined in its presentation, so that you knew the spacing of which way to run away from specifically, but that's not too bad. The other thing that's kind of janky about the Scadussy avatar is the thorns that it sends at you from a distance. It does the 1-2. It kind of blocks the camera a little bit in a weird way. You can still see what's going on somewhat, but I'd rather just it be a little bit lower on your screen so that you can really see all the tells on what's coming next. Other than that, Scadussy avatar is a good combination of understanding and intuiting based off of arena presentation. You can understand sort of the attack patterns and how to use them to your advantage. The AI is excellent in that regard. The actual strategy involving like taking advantage of the AoEs in the head and understanding just convenient ways to drop him and then taking the grab, and then the telegraphing of the charge that he does in Phase 2 and 3, being a good distance away before he does this full body quick charge hitbox at you is quite nice. I'm glad that you're just not at his body when he charges at you. That's fantastic. Overall, just an amazingly balanced boss. I don't know what else there is to say. It's just a really well-balanced boss. And that's why he's number 1. I look forward to fighting that boss whenever I go fight him next, whenever the next patch is. I think he's going to be a fantastic boss, always looking forward. He's going to be just... he's just going to be fantastic. I can't wait. I can't wait to fight him again. And, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to get better and better at his fight. And am I going to kind of dominate him each time? Yeah, sure I am. But that is through good build making in the preparatory sense. That is through good observation on his arena and his design. And that is through good execution and the boss allowing for all of this to take place through great game balance. I love Scadussy Avatar. I just do. Now, I still really like Mesmer and Renala, and kind of, you know, there are some issues, but I still really enjoy Gaius, Bale, Midra, and Ramana. Those are like my, I don't know why, top 7 instead of a top 10. That's fine. Bosses that I haven't talked about yet, Chief Bloodfiend, he's okay. He's fine. It's whatever. I don't think I've talked about much else aside from the biggest issues, but I should talk about, let's see. I should talk about the problems now, in terms of the bosses, the real issues. The NPC gank at the end is really bad. It's probably the worst From Software boss I've ever had the displeasure of fucking around with. And it's not really officially a boss, but it's the worst From Software encounter that I've ever had the displeasure of dealing with. The fact that these are supposed to be your allies, and they have like 1,000,000 HP, I don't summon, so I can't tell that they have 1,000,000 HP, even when you summon them as an NPC. Which is true. Like, to help you out, they have a ton of HP. But actually dealing with them in a gank fight, with limited help like I did, because the quests break arbitrarily when you approach Shadowkeep. That's fucked up, by the way. Weird quest design. That's fucked up. That means that they deal 1,000,000 damage for some reason, and you have to deal with them with the speed of, like, Ansbach coming in, which he's so slow. He's so slow to attack. And just like at Scadussy Blessing 17, Horn Sense charged homing soul masses can one-shot you. And a lot of these attacks, when they gank up on you, that combos can one-shot you. And even though it's like I didn't even have more as an antagonist, I don't know where Tialie was, I couldn't have him help or hurt me, I guess. I just didn't know what was going on. I wasn't going to look up a guide on my first run. And, oh man, that's just really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. It was terrible. It was just like, can't you just make it so that these guys have normal HP for like a 60 bigger character, and then give them all of the, you know, have them at the same Scadussy blessing that we are? Why can't you do that? Why can't you just trust the blessing system that you've introduced and use it for the NPCs, so that we're not just basically fighting what look like cheaters online? One of the easiest ways to identify a cheater in PvP is to see if they have thousands and thousands of HP. Going up against that is ridiculous. Going up against like 4 of them is atrocious, especially at that damage output too. So that's goofy as hell. The Scadussy system itself, I don't understand why they couldn't have just put the balance around Melania tier and then just not had the Scadussy system. We don't need that. Like, all of the weapons and talismans and all of this is already a reason to explore. This is already non-linear progression that boosts our builds. We do not need this system. It's unnecessary. And though I found almost all of them, I got to blessing level 17, which is fine. It's still just a goofy and unnecessary system. You know, if people are going to be level 700, who fucking let them? Who cares about them, right? Who cares? Alright? I think the level cap might as well be 150 in this game, right? You still get so many options, and yet a lot of builds are very point specific, where you have to be exactly at whatever starting class in order to reach 150 and not go over. I think if the level cap was 150, it'd be fine. But introducing Scadussy fragments to go against that, against leveling above it, is, you know, it's just goofy. It's just not. It's not something that I would go and say, yes, this is great. I love this, but I don't hate it either. It's just like, why do you, well, what's going on? I don't give a shit. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Radahn. Fucking Radahn. Radahn's horrible, okay? He has bad boss pattern RNG like the others, like I mentioned a long time ago in the video, because his moveset is very extensive. On my run, I had him do a lot of one pattern, and then like 30 or 40 attempts in, he switched to doing a lot of other patterns just through sheer RNG. And I was like, well, I thought I was mastering the boss, but he's just pulling fucking shit out of his ass. Like, he's just pulling a rabbit out of his hat. Like, oops, didn't show you this. I didn't show you this. And it's just like, that doesn't feel good, Miyazaki. That feels like dog shit. There's bad terrain in this area, so if you try to learn parry strats, sometimes if you get into the central ditch, hit attacks might just go over or under, depending on who's where. And the parry strats can be very scuffed based off of terrain. His left-right cross-slash attack is super janky, and that it will roll catch you, and that's already been nerfed from being a absolute true combo to just a guaranteed roll catch, unless you're positioned all the way on the left side of his leg before the attack comes out, and then you can roll it. Which is terrible because that limits the amount of build expression that you can have. Even within my already limited aspect, there was quite a bit of build freedom, but now it's extremely limited, which is really, really horrible. Even then, if you're positioned in the right way, if you're not in the right spot in the arena, as in the terrain again, that attack can still hit you even if you're quote-unquote positioned right 95% of the time, which is horrible. The frames in Phase 2 is an absolute nightmare. The performance in general has not been very good in the game, in the DLC. Yeah, the visual acuity of understanding his attacks in Phase 2 is awful. is awful. But he has some strange things in hitboxes as well, where it looks like instead of sword damage that hits you, it's the shoulder cap. You know, it's his like not van braces, it's his pauldrons that hit you. And you take full sword damage. You don't take a lesser pauldron hitbox or damage. Which means it's supposed to be coated with the sword, but the hitbox just comes out earlier. And this has just been proven frame by frame by people. And not only that, but you see this in his thrust for his Mohg's Blood Flame thing comes out a little bit earlier than it should too. And that's an attack that's not that bad to learn. The hitbox as well for the initial meteor knockdown when he goes down and then takes the rocks up and flies up and then sends the meteors at you. That's again another shoulder check type of hitbox, but it's dealing sword damage again, which is just goofy. It's just a flawed hitbox. Actually learning those strategies isn't bad, but immersive wise, hitbox wise, just design wise, it's fucked up. It's just fucked up. I will tell you what I really enjoy his moves wise. His stomp, his standard right side combo with the rocks going up in the air, that's very good. Spinning gravity thrust that he usually starts off the fight with, that's also quite good. His gravity suck is quite nice. The X cut, which is normally at the end of the 3-hit left-right X cut. Sometimes he can just do the X cut. That's a good move. Actually sending the meteors, figuring out how to dodge that and doing that well is really cool. His Lion's Claw and Savage Lion's Claw, fantastic move. And then the Phase 2 projectile slices that he does with Holy, with Miquella's help, absolutely cool. I like that a lot. Here's where my praise ends. And there was already some negativity, but my praise for Radahn is over. Because there's a lot of problems, and if I list the problems previously, some people might say, well, at least we got Prime Radahn. Let me drink my water real quick. This is very fucking obviously not Prime Radahn. And I cannot believe people are actually trying to copium and spew this nonsense talking point. This is not Prime Radahn, you fucking idiots. No Leonard, which via the rules of the Gates of Divinity, you could have just been able to grab any fucking horse and revive Leonard through that. No fucking Great Bow, even though the Lion Great Bow is more dex focused, and his new swords are more dex focused, so a Great Bow would have been perfect since he's in a smaller body, like Mohg's body. He doesn't have Collapsing Stars, he doesn't have Cragblade, he doesn't have Gravity Wave on his X cut in either phase, even though he has it during his old thing. During his old form when he was Scarlet Rotted. You're taking his mind, his fresh mind, and we're putting it in a new body. He should have his intelligence enough to use his old gravity sorcery. And he doesn't. He doesn't use his triple gravity thrust, he just uses it one time. Which doesn't make any fucking sense unless Miquella abandons his capacity for making a good plan. Which is fucking ridiculous, because normally, if Miquella wasn't so fucking idiotic during this plot, then we would have had a better story. It would have been better. The lore would have been better. Everything would have been better. But no, because Miquella's an idiot, we don't get Prime Radahn. We don't get a new take on what could have been an even stronger version than Prime Radahn. No, we get this new hybrid bastardization, which is fucked up on the mechanical sense that I mentioned previously. This is a disappointment for me, who, as a fucking gravity build main on this point, is looking rather forward to potentially fighting a Radahn optional super boss. Okay? Ever since the lore in the Shadowkeep, I was rather looking forward to Miquella potentially bringing back a large amount of people. I was potentially looking forward to fighting Godwyn in the memory. Yes, he died a soul death, but he could have been fought in the memory, like maybe in Dark Souls 2, like you fight the Giant King in the memory. Okay? We could have fought Godwyn in the memory. Radahn being the final boss is fucking absurd. A repeat type of guy for the final DLC boss, potentially the last piece of Elden Ring content ever. Give me a fucking break, Miyazaki. Give me a fucking break, okay? This is ridiculous. Okay, Miquella abandons his love, and he did this, presumably, like, in plot-wise, like, the writers had to have Miquella abandon his love, otherwise it would just make more sense to bring back Melania. It would just make sense, and then they would set the point of entry for the DLC even later, which they didn't want. So they were like, oh, what would he do? Well, he's looking to make an age of compassion. Why don't we have him get rid of his love? What fucking sense does that make? What fucking sense does that fucking make? Also, Radahn doesn't use his ceremonial short sword and dagger. Even though, presumably, even though they're ceremonial, they should have use. They're just on his belt? For no reason? They're just there? As part of his armor, just to be aesthetic? Why? Why? What? Really? Like I understand we're not going to have him use Cragblade on his swords right now, but... Really? No ceremonial short swords? Like, you could have had, like, Miquella's extra arms use those, or something. I don't know. That would have been interesting. Miquella as a support is super fucking boring and not conceptually interesting at all. It's just bonus damage. That's all he does. He doesn't do, like... He doesn't have interesting boluses ready if you if you status Radahn. Which would be interesting if you Scarlet Errata and then Miquella's like, have a bolus. That would be cool. That would be nice. Remember what I said about Scadussy Avatar? Remember how I said it was really good observation to intuit and understand the strategy behind what this creature was and how to go forward in execution with that boss? Remember the good strategy for Radahn that was presented in the fucking base game, being summon a million guys and go through it? Guess what advice people are giving online? Don't summon Anspach, don't summon Tialier, even though that's the clear-cut, game-intended, recommended strategy for base Radahn. A recommended in-game experience for base Radahn. It's like, no, just not recommended. People are just arbitrarily not recommending it. It's like, are you fucking serious? Are you absolutely serious? This is how far away from base Radahn that we've gone, and we're trying to still pretend? Are we really trying to pretend that this is good design? Speaking of which, he is not designed for shield poke in the fucking slightest, which means that a lot of the bosses in the DLC were designed around people rolling, and that people who wanted a balanced, challenging experience that preferred using some sort of shield poke strategy or shield plus X don't get that. They don't get a challenging experience. They get to smurf everything. When I switched, and I didn't know about this strategy ahead of time, when I switched to a Bleed Sword Lance with Cragblade, and I got the Golden Shield, I didn't even have the Haley Tree Knight Shield, I didn't even have the Fingerprint Shield, I had the Golden, not even a maxed out, a Golden Great Shield. I destroyed him in my second attempt using that setup, and it was not skillful, and it was devastatingly easy, compared to the 59 other attempts that I struggled using the Ruin's Greaser. Holy shit. What a joke. What a joke. It's just, the boss is just barely designed. Period. Holy shit, it's awful. There's also a bug where you can spam jump or use a Dragon Breath when he jumps up into the air as his desperation move, and he just falls down with an opening. He just immediately falls down, so it's just bugged in your favor too. Not only is it like not designed in your favor, or like overly designed in your favor if you're using shield strategies, but the fight's just bugged. It's just overtuned and bugged. And lore-wise, it's janky as well. It also just a repeat type of enemy instead of potentially being Godwyn. Too many people are looking at the lore in terms of what it is and not what it very, very easily could have fucking been. The Gates of Divinity were unknown and could have been anything because this is a world of fucking fiction, okay? And it could have been anything. Even Soul Revival, which Miquella was looking into in Castle Soul, aka there was precedent in people looking into, you know, Miquella looking into Godwyn, and helping, having people help him look into Godwyn at Castle Sol, with the eclipse and everything, and how the eclipse is part of the symbolism with Godwyn and his Death Knights. Speaking of which, the DLC seems to be centered around Godwyn. The tree looks like Deathblight, the Death Knights with the Godwyn visage in his in the arenas. Holy shit. Like, the fact that there are grave birds everywhere, and there's ghost flame dragons, and there's a death right bird, and like there's so much symbols of death everywhere. And yet, no fucking Godwyn. Even though Godwyn's death was literally the lore cause and the start of everything that we have in this base game, in the game. Going full circle would have been perfect, but no, we got fucking discount, not prime, Radahn. Holy shit, how disappointing. You could have even resurrected Malenia as the second choice, which would have been cool, but it would have been devastating time-wise, like just actually getting over to Malenia. But Godwyn, we could have set the entrance to the DLC much earlier with Godwyn. You could have resurrected him in Mesmer's body, in which case the DLC, without Scadussy fragments, could have been set you could have put it in like the Round Table Hold, in one of the areas behind the Stone Sword Keys. And that way you have access to enter it early, so if you wanted to include any of the Int Faith Whetblade or Arcane Faith Whetblade or something like that to allow for an Int Faith infusion that you can potentially run in and get early from the DLC, so that you can have good progression. You could have a warp gate that leads to the underground so that you can have your arcane infusions earlier. Same thing with like Int Faith and all that. That could have been all accessed earlier if you decided to make it Godwyn, because you could have set it so early without Scadussy blessings. And you could have had people do little runs where you do death runs or torrent runs and you run past everything to get to a certain point, at which point you can then progress a lot easier with these builds that now are eternally just worse. They're just arbitrarily worse than the other options. Let me drink some more water. Reviving Godwyn in Mesmer's body would be so fucking thematic and so cool. Think of it like a Phoenix revival, considering like you're burning away bits of Deathblight or what have you, or the burning away of Destined Death through Mesmer's flame. Snakes maybe could have been finessed out with surgical precision, because Mikola is obviously very good at performing surgery on Malenia, and he has a lot of experience with needles and unalloyed gold. Unalloyed gold can obviously help with any missing parts that might have in Mesmer's body, like the holes where the snakes were. So that would have been fine. We could have had excellent bird symbolism as well with the phoenix, but not only through the twin bird / death birds that govern these aspects of death, or those who live in death already, which via the Death Knights are already kind of related to Godwyn. And of course the Prince of Death ending and all of that lore with Fia is already very sort of two halves of the same coin, with that aspect of the Golden Order, the in-faith aspect, and then the in-faith aspect of Death Sorcery and Death Blight. What's interesting as well is we already have this sort of fire aspect of Int Faith within the magma of Rykard, which is interesting because that's kind of snake related as well. Int Faith, Int Faith, Int Faith. And we could have also had Godwyn doing all three of these aspects, including spells that glow red, that glow blue, and that glow yellow. Three primary colors. It would have been very visually satisfying to look at. That would have been pretty fucking cool. The only thing I wouldn't want is like, no, please, no fucking Deathblight in that fight. Holy shit. But would have been fucking sick, dude. It would have been great. Would have been fantastic. But yeah, we didn't get that. Oh, we didn't get it. We didn't get that. Oh boy. What would have also been cool is, as super bosses, if, you know, we could have gotten Radahn and Malenia revived anyway on the side as optional extra bosses, which would have been cool because there are still bodies like Moog and such that you can progress through the base game for to give Miquella access to. You know, Miquella doesn't have to die in that instance. Speaking of which, there's no ending option to side with Miquella. There is no quest option to recruit all 7 of the followers to your side. Imagine also a new ending with all 7 of the followers on your side. Like, it could be called the Age of Compatriots, or not compatriots, like the Age of Cooperation. The Age of Cooperation. You could have had the Age of Compassion through Miquella as an ending, and you could have had the Age of Cooperation. That would have been sick. That would have been so cool. And yet no new endings, and also, like, no interaction with the base game. Ronaldo doesn't care that, like, Rolana's dead. You know, Malenia doesn't care that Miquella's dead, or vice versa. There's, like, no lore interaction with the base game. It's like, what? How? Why didn't they go through and put through this connection? Like, the Malekith Garank thing, if you finish his quest, he gives additional dialogue. Or the Sif Artorias thing. Like, all this stuff is really cool, and there's precedent. And yet, we don't get that here, and it's just so unimmersive and ridiculous. Yeah, I also think that, like, Placidusax would be a better lore choice than even Radahn as a lord. Like, imagine you kill Baal, okay, and then you get Placidusax's head. You kill Placidusax, right? Or maybe you don't even have to kill him. Miquella could, like, stitch the heads on with his needle aspect. And then he has... Okay, he is a god without a lord, and Placidusax is a lord whose god has fled. And I know Miquella knows Placidusax because Miquella's needle for curing the Flame of Frenzy influence and all this outer god influence is only usable at Placidusax's arena beyond time. So, I know that there's a connection there, and that's more than what was established with Radahn in the base game. Not to mention the ending cutscene. People are assuming, like, well, did Radahn agree to the vow or not? And I'm just here saying, where the fuck do you guys see Radahn? Radahn's not in the ending, in the tiny cutscene with Miquella. It's just Miquella. There's no Radahn. That cutscene could have been stripped of all of its scope. And it could have been originally intended for Godwyn, and it could have been intended for fucking Placidusax. How do you know? You don't fucking know. Because the lore, like, that attaches Miquella to Radahn was stapled on to Radahn's gear from the Remembrance. It was just stapled on at the end. Literally, just in this DLC, all of the lore was just arbitrarily stapled on. It could have been different. And it could have been different in the way that it followed something that was already established in the base game, that allowed people to feel rewarded for making theories. But even if nobody made the theory, it would have just been more satisfying to look back on and see, aha, well, there's this connection here. No fucking connection until the DLC is ridiculous. But yeah, some people are also saying that, oh, Radahn was the strongest. He would have been the best case scenario, you know. It's like, okay, well, he is the strongest after Godwyn was dead. It would make sense also if Ranni killed Godwyn if he was the strongest, you know. So that's weird. Also, Malenia is absolutely stronger than Radahn, and I'm not talking about, like, because Malenia is stronger than Radahn when we fight both of them. The rot affects Malenia too. Her Scarlet Aeonia legendary attack affected her too. That's why Finlay had to drag her all the way back to the Erdtree to recover. Malenia, after taking a lot of Radahn's attacks and her own Wombo attack, is still stronger than Radahn was in the base game. There's some basic scaling for you. Very simple scaling for you. Malenia, still stronger. And if we take the durability to account, she was stronger then. And even though she had Finlay to help her out versus Radahn, even though Radahn was holding back because he's lore aspect, we can see Radahn's ultimate attack. Ultimate potential attack in holding back the stars and releasing them, versus Scarlet Aeonia. We know the impact of both of these things. You can see the crater. It affects like a small part of East Limgrave, versus fucking the entirety of Caelid being destroyed, okay? The impact, there's no comparison. There is no comparison. So Malenia would have just been the choice for strength. But like Godwyn could have been the choice for strength too. You know? Prime Placidusax. Maybe even Prime Bale, because they were both Elden Lord level, right? They probably would have been better candidates for Lords as well. Just based off of pure strength, if people are using that copium. So, what the fuck? Why is it Radahn? And I like Radahn a lot. I really do. I really like Radahn a lot. But he would have just been great as an optional super boss on the side. An actual prime Radahn back, not the bastardization that we got. Oh, by the way, Malekith, the being that was feared by all demigods, sure, he was feared because he could kill them permanently with destined death, and they didn't like that. But he was also fucking wicked strong, and if he was brought back, he could have been a Iron Fist strength-based arbiter. Of course, strength, faith, but like, you know what I mean, like power. Power-wise, Malekith would have also been an incredibly strong option. So I don't get it. I don't get it. Like, Radahn is like the 5th or 6th or 7th choice for pure power. So people that are saying, well, Radahn was chosen because he was strong. Stop the cap. Stop the copium. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. But yeah, this goofy lore choice, this goofy-ass lore and lack of connection to the base game and all of this, this has destroyed the lore for me. I no longer care about the lore as much because the story's bad. Do you want fun facts about a movie which plot is terrible? Do you want cool production facts or really interesting, like, lore undertones of a movie that isn't very good, plot-wise, for its central story? Do you want that? Because I don't care about that, personally. And I would be willing to say that most people don't care about cute little fun facts regarding a movie which main story kind of sucks ass now. Okay? And so that's what the lore situation with Radahn and all of that, that's what this does to me. I don't really care about the lore anymore. And considering the lore was taken from me when it was given to me in the base game, like, I didn't care about Dark Souls 3 lore, but I cared a lot about Elden Ring lore. You've taken that from me. You've given me something good and you've taken it from me. So that's huge minus points on that regard. Really unfortunate. Really tragically unfortunate. And so, with that being said, thank you for watching. There's still so much disappointment that I don't think can be fixed with patches because they're central design choices. But I did have fun with the DLC, and anybody being a fan of Elden Ring will probably have fun too. But I cannot recommend it, because it's not going to matter. If you like Elden Ring, you're probably already going to get it and you're going to enjoy it. But if you don't do it. Wait for a patch, wait for a sale, and that's my review. Bye.